there, it's Sandra from Savvy Teaching Tips, and I'm here today to talk about how to modify your practice so that you can include science of reading in your reading instruction. While you're here, please like and subscribe and ring that bell for notifications of all my new videos when they come out. I've been teaching for a long time and I'm pretty happy with the way I teach reading, but science of reading, there's so much evidence that proves that science of reading is a great way to teach. And personally, for myself, it fits right into my philosophy, because my philosophy about teaching reading is that hit them with everything. So what do I mean? Well, children learn in different ways. For example, myself, I know my learning style. My learning style is, I figured this out as a university student. My learning style is I need to take notes as the person is talking. And then the notes help me remember what was being said. And for myself, what really frustrates me is if I'll go to a Pro D or something now as an adult, if they don't give you the handouts right away, or they don't give you access to the slideshow, you know, at the end they'll go, oh, I'll send you the slides, you can download them. Or they'll say, I'll pass the handout. For me, that really is counterintuitive. It does not work for my learning style. My learning style, I need to have something to write notes on. I like to write the notes right on the paper, or write on, you know, I'll get out my iPad and I'll use Notable and I'll take my notes that way. But to not have that connected with the slideshow when it was being taught, or the handout, it's really hard for me to get past that. And it makes it more difficult for me and more challenging for me. But the people who are giving these workshops and doing it that way, that's not their learning style. They don't know that that's my learning style. And for them, they find it very frustrating when they are giving the lecture to have people sitting and writing in front of them. So I get that too. Everybody's different. So anyway, my philosophy then when I'm teaching children is that I'm going to try lots of different ways to teach the same stuff, because some kids are not going to get it if you teach it one way. Some kids just need repetition overall, but some kids, they need it in all sorts of different ways until something goes click. Okay, so even though phonics hasn't been standard practice in a long time, I have been doing something similar. I have a previous video on the scope and sequence that I use, and the two programs that I use for teaching phonics are McCracken Spelling Through Phonics and Words Their Way, and I strongly recommend them. Anyway, how to modify your practice. That's the point of this video today. Science of reading. Science of reading refers to a body of research related to how the brain learns how to read. And it's been around for a while. It's really become an education buzzword in the last 5 years or so, because people are starting to realize that it works and the research has some valid points. But if you have been teaching for a while, you know, let's say you've been teaching for 10 years, or even if you've only been teaching for a few years and you have a way to teach reading and you're comfortable with it, it's hard to change. So stop and take a breath. It's not going to be overwhelming. We're not going to make it too difficult for you. Okay, so where do you start? So I started thinking about this and I'm like, are there quick changes that you can make to your practice from where you were to what you are going to be if you're going to be using the science of reading? And I have 5 quick changes that you can make. Just 5. And they're not very hard. So the first one is directly teach phonics. So for myself, having been using these other programs, Spelling Through Phonics and Words Their Way, I've been using those for my spelling program. Well, I'm going to consider that directly teaching phonics. But I'm also going to add to it. So this year I have a 2-3 split. So I have second graders and third graders. But really, those second graders, especially those second graders, have never had a normal year of school since COVID started. They are really far behind. And those third graders, the ones that I'm getting, I taught last year, so I know where they are. Some of them are far ahead, but there's a number of them who need that. So we're not necessarily going to be running this as a third grade and a second grade program. You have to go back to where they are and pull them up, right? That's the idea. Anyway, step 1, directly teach phonics. Set a time in your schedule for daily phonics practice. If you make it part of the routine, you don't forget to do it. Follow a scope and sequence. So I've got one listed in my previous video of how I teach phonics, the scope and sequence I use. maybe your school has a standard scope and sequence, and that's a great way to start. You need to make sure that it works best when everybody in your school is on the same page with this one. Phonics lessons can be whole group or small group, right? Your choice. What scope and sequence should you use? Like I said, I've got mine that you could use. If you have a commercial program that you're using that includes a scope and sequence, like I said before, please use that. So commercial programs are better than no program at all. And my freebie download is a explicit phonics scope and sequence that I use, and it matches up with the skills in the Common Core curriculum. So that's the first thing, directly teach phonics. Number 2, use decodable readers instead of leveled text. So what's the problem with leveled books? Well, especially when you're in the KN1 area, they really rely on predictable patterns. And so what happens, what I've found, especially because I teach a lot of ELL learners, so they're still learning to speak English, some of them, and then they get the pattern that, you know, I see a dog, I see a cat, and they're looking at the pictures. They're not even looking at the words. And this used to frustrate me because I'd be like, well, and so I actually changed my reading practice. I'll talk about that in a different video. Instead of I stopped using the leveled books in my school and went to a different program, but that's for another day. Today we're going to talk about the problem with leveled books. They're predictable. Kids aren't looking at the words. You want them to look at the words because they're trying to learn how to read. Okay? The kids memorizing, if they're memorizing the pattern, they're starting to look at cues and clues that are outside of the text. They're using those to guess the unknown words instead of actually looking at the sounds in the words. And this works fine in beginning tests, but it doesn't work very well in more difficult texts. And think about the texts that you read or you read in university. There are words in there you didn't know how to, like I was talking about diphthongs and digraphs in my one of my previous videos. I mean, how did we learn how to pronounce those words? Well, we looked at the sounds in the words. And adults have pretty much memorized most of the words that we read. It's those big hard words that we stop and sound out. So we need to teach that. Anyway, so use decodable readers. Another strike against predictable readers is they will often use more vocabulary that's more difficult. So instead of saying, the book might say, I like pizza, I like spaghetti. Well, spaghetti, that's a long word. Whereas a decodable book would say, I like pasta, because all the sounds are decodable in the word. And it's shorter, and less sounds, is simpler, easier for beginning readers to sound out. The flaw about decodable readers is that the vocabulary can be a little more difficult. So, for example, instead of saying, I like to dance, it'll say, I did a jig. Jig? I danced a jig. What's a jig? Well, you have to explain. So you need to make sure you explain those words, because those aren't words we commonly use in our language today, but they're easy to decode. So decodable readers have. So where do I get decodable readers? I have a few in my store that I have, I've linked below. There's a freebie of one also linked below. But honestly, if you really need a lot of them and you don't have a lot of money, this will take a lot of time, but you can go through Teachers Pay Teachers and download all the free copies you can find, put them together, and come up with some sort of a, mishmash program. Or you can buy programs. And there are lots of programs that have been created by people on TPT, which are really great. But there's also the commercial programs. Maybe your school has bought one. If it hasn't, then, like I said, if you don't have any money, don't spend your money, right? We don't make enough money to spend a lot of our own money. Go into, go get some freebies. There's tons of them. Okay? So, step 1 was directly teach phonics. Step 2, use decodable readers instead of the leveled texts. The third one, daily phonemic awareness instruction, especially with your Ks and 1s. A few minutes a day really helps. Like I said with the phonics, you can do it part of your morning meeting. You can do it as a warm-up for your reading lesson or for your small group lessons. Make it part of the routine. Should you do this with grades 2 and 3 or 3rd and 2nd grade? Yes, I think so. Well, now, definitely I'm going to be doing that. I really think that my 2nd graders are really going to need this because there was so much learning loss with COVID. And COVID's still around, so there's still things, kids get sick, they miss school, parents are afraid to keep their kids home, somebody in the family gets sick and the whole family stays home for 3 weeks. This is where society's going. So I'm going to do it with my 2nd and 3rd graders. Now, 4th step, intentionally build your vocabulary and your oral language, because part of the science of reading talks about the importance of oral language development. And kids who speak more, they're better readers because they speak more. They're better speakers. It makes sense, right? It's all about communicating what's in your brain out to people, whether you're writing it down or whether you're talking about it or whether you're reading it. That's what language is for. So if kids have stronger oral language, they should have stronger reading skills. And I have had the odd kid where they've got strong language skills and poor reading skills, and that's when you know, there's a learning disability there. Some testing needs to be done, something more needs to be done for this kid. So I've just given you explanations as to why I think oral language is so important. I find that intentionally building the vocabulary for me is pretty easy because I have been teaching in a very high ESL, ELL population. So my students come to school and they can speak English, but their parents are not native English speakers. So there's some vocabulary loss there. They don't actually have all the background that native English speakers have. And I know this for a fact because I actually spent a year teaching in New Zealand about 20 years ago. I had been teaching for 10 years in the city that I still teach in. I was absolutely astounded at how much these kids knew and how we could have these long conversations with 5-year-olds because I was teaching new entrants there. Anyway, but it really made me realize that there's something to be said for the fact that native English speakers have stronger vocabulary. And then, of course, my own children are native English speakers. And my son, who's now 16, was extremely articulate as a young kid. So I got to realize how limited the language was for my students. So how do you intentionally build that vocabulary? Never assume they know all the words. Talk about it. When you're reading a read aloud, and there's a wagon. Do you know what a wagon is? Of course you'd be like, well, of course they know what a wagon is. Well, ELL kids don't know what a wagon is. And remember, when you add these activities into your daily routine, they become much easier to do. Here's some examples of things that I would do. So weekly vocabulary words. These are not spelling words. These are vocabulary words. We're learning how to use these words in our oral language. But I also, like if we're doing a special topic, let's say it's Thanksgiving. Well, there's a certain number of Thanksgiving vocabulary words. I'm talking about words like family and feast and get together and be thankful, those kinds of words. And so what I do is I do a write the room activity. And even with 3rd graders, they find it really easy. But then I expand it. Okay, so now you've copied all these words down, use them in a couple sentences, or write me a story about that, or how can we push that further? While I'm doing that and while I'm introducing the words to the kids, we'll sit down together and we'll have a turn and talk. And like the word thankful. Okay, so let's see how we could use this in a sentence. I'm thankful for, and I would say, well, I'm thankful for being healthy and having a healthy family. And then the other child could say what they're thankful for, right? Turn and talk. I always do a turn and talk when we finish a read aloud. It's a really great way to get the kids to speak about what they start of the year. I'll have some questions. I'll write them on the board that they have to follow. And after a while, once they're getting the hang of it, maybe lead their own. And I might put a child who's a struggling ELL learner, or a low kid who comes from a home where they don't do a lot of things outside of the school, so their experience level is less, so their language is less. I'll put those kids with somebody who talks a lot, and that will help model for them a good way. And keep an eye on that the kid who talks well is not doing all the talking. So another thing that I like to do is just chat with my class. So because of COVID, we've been eating in the classroom during instructional time. And so it's instructional time. I feel like we need to be doing something instructional. So we chat about their day. and I'll ask, and I'll pick on kids. If I start the year, I don't pick on kids. I just say, does anybody have something to share? Did something exciting happen at recess? Who would like to share what they did on the weekend? Did anybody go away over the summer? And conversations come up. And we talk about things. And then we talk about things that the kids are interested in, things they'd like to watch on TV or YouTube, games that they like to play on their computer, sports that they play with their friends. And they say the funniest things. They really do. It's so interesting to just hear their points of view on things. When you're having discussions, as the year goes on, build into those open-ended questions that take a lot more time to answer, and you can't just say yes or no. Use questions that start with why or how or what do you think, right? And if you say, what do you think about that? Good. That's not a good. What do you mean by good? It's good. Well, how is it good? What do you mean? Why do you like it? It's good is not enough information. I don't really understand. What else could you say to me to tell me? Try and draw it out of them. So, and number 5, change how you teach sight words. It's not about memorizing the words. I have several posts on my blog about how I teach sight word, and I've linked them below. But something I want to add to those posts is that all those words that we think of as high frequency words, not all of them, most of those words that we think of as high frequency words or sight words are actually decodable. And so think about it, that, the, at. We've got our digraph at the beginning, our short vowel, and our consonant. It's almost a CVC word, right? It's a CVC word. So why not this? Those sorts of things. Sometimes there's a few parts of the words those kids need to memorize by heart, like the word said. Well, AI says why? That would be a heart word. So if you're teaching spelling, I've got more, I'll link some things about heart words below as well. But they just write a heart if they don't know how to spell the vowel sound. That's fine. As long as they get in the consonants, that's a great way to do that. If you've come across a word and a decodable word that the kids are having trouble with, you can add it to your vocabulary list to study. Because like I said at the beginning, we do weekly vocabulary words, and these are not words that we're going to try and have a spelling test on, but I'm trying to get them to understand what the word means, and in the process they're exposed to it lots, and they will begin to maybe memorize the spelling. Going back to heart words, if you're teaching and doing phoneme mapping, which I think, or orthographic mapping, which I think is a great way to teach phonemic awareness and develop that skill. When you introduce the words, it helps the kids just focus on the sounds of the words. So I've got a YouTube video linked below as well that explains how I do phoneme mapping with my class. I do it in small groups usually. Okay, so that's it. The 5 steps. Directly teach phonics. Use decodable readers instead of leveled text. Do daily phonemic awareness, even in grades 2 and 3, especially right now with the COVID. So intentionally work on building oral language and vocabulary development, and change how you teach sight words. That's it, 5 steps. Really easy. If it's so overwhelming, I would start by trying to get phonics into your schedule. In the order that I've introduced these 5 topics, start with the first one. Try and get that in your schedule once, and maybe it'll take you a month and you'll be really confident with it. Maybe it'll take you 3 months until you got that in your schedule. But once that's solid, then I would add decodable readers, right? Because we are human. You can only add so much at a time. Then I would introduce daily phonemic awareness instruction. Then I would talk about intentionally building vocabulary, especially oral language. And then lastly, change how you teach sight words. And that's it. So I hope that these steps will help, because honestly, teaching is already extremely overwhelming, and teaching reading is really, it takes time to learn how to do. And once you've got a program that you like and you think you're doing a great job, it's hard to change. I understand that. So just change a little bit at a time, and I hope that these steps that I've outlined today will help you. That's all for today. So please check out my Facebook and my Instagram at Savvy Teaching, and my TikTok at Savvy Teaching. And we'll see you in the next video. Bye.